start with start off. Just talk about a little bit of your background and pipe bands, light music, P-rock, composing, teaching. You've done it all. What's driven you to be such an all-rounder?
I think years of wanting to keep going at it, and each time in the position that I was in, which was usually a piper or some form of a leader in a band, different things needed to be done. The solo aspect, I think, has just occurred over time. We were all brought up in the 70s. You played your light music, you learned the P-rick, you did a certain amount of these until you were just told that's what you did. And so you had that, came on to bands. I started to really enjoy teaching, and I enjoyed composing a bit. I think my first composing influence really would have been a cross between Colin McGee live in the City Victoria room, watching him doing it and thinking, wow, this is really, it's kind of like a recipe. He's making these notes and now our band's going to play this. And that really struck me as something really cool as a 9-year-old, 10-year-old, at the practices there. And then, of course, my forever idolization of Donald McLeod. I got to hear him when I was, I think, 10 years old, and to realize how many tunes he had actually made the night he played was something I'll never forget. It was fantastic.
So Colin McKee, are you talking about like Troy's wedding and stuff like that? Or?
Absolutely. Colin was a fellow who was in Victoria when I grew up. He's still there. He was the lead drummer in the City Victoria band for a number of years. He's also a piper in the City Victoria band. When he came here and got a job with the government, my father piped at his wedding. That would be in the early 70s, I think. And it all kind of goes around in a circle because he composed this tune, Troy's Wedding, for Jamie Troy, June 7th, 1975. So it's all kind of the compositional thing in the family, and it's all kind of tied together in Victoria there.
So what about Victoria in the 1970s? What was the scene like? It's a far reaches kind of Western Canada. Was it a matter of being in the right place at the right time for a very young piper like yourself learning the instrument?
I'd say absolutely. There was a vibrant community of Scottish people there at the time. Having not been there for 30 years now, I can't say why it's faded away as much as it has, unlike Vancouver that's held on to the roots better. But when I grew up, there was a good junior band, the Army Band, Canadian Scottish, that my dad was the pipe major of, was both supportive and active in the community. Jamie Troy was there. Archie Cairns was a big influence when he moved out to run in the Army. I guess he was running, I'm not sure what he was running, being the commander. But he started the Vancouver Island Pipers Club in 1967 or 8, and that became a really, really big event, and it still to this day goes the first Saturday of every month. And there's a solo piper, there's a guest piper, they had a P-rick player, and there was a program that no matter what was going on, and it worked, I think, partly in Victoria because it's always good weather. The worst we got was a lousy rainy night in January or February. So I was brought down there as a kid before I was playing. My first ever public performance was there in 1970, I want to say, I think. And often tied in a meeting there with the Vancouver Indoor Meet the following week, where they would bring over the judge. And again, it doesn't matter how it was worked out, but they would host Ian McFadge and Angus McClellan. I remember being there, Donald McLeod, a few times. And they'd have them over for the week. It's a great trip. It didn't seem to be a big deal back then for someone from Scotland to take one more week to enjoy themselves on a holiday and stay and give some lessons to the top brass over there and perform at the Pipers Club. Mm-hmm. And the junior band, eager to do something. There was a eagerness. A part of that, I won't go too long into this, also stems from the fact that the Coeur d'Alene School had gone from being just a little something to a big thing with Bob Hardy and Andrew Wright. John McClellan had been there previously, but Bob and Andy, and as we all know, Bob Hardy was famous for recruiting Canadian people, a few from the West Coast to his band, and my original teacher, Hal Senick, was one of them. But he helped to nurture these people, Jamie Troy and Dan Diesner, and a bunch of them into forming a little bit of a band down in Coeur d'Alene. I think they really did it to sort of show the students how a senior band would work. Jamie must have had bigger ideas in his head that this was going to be a band, and that's what really became the founding of the City of Victoria Pipe Band. And when it grew and gathered some mass, as you know, things started to go.
Mm-hmm. So what about your dad died when you were quite young, and for a lot of kids, for the pipes and your dad was a piper and you played his pipes, I believe. What was that like? Did that make you want to play more, or were you tempted to kind of give it up at such a young age?
I don't think I was tempted to give it up so much. I took a little break just because I still don't know if I was in a bit of shock or a lazy 14-year-old at the time with the pressure. I was scared for a few weeks to touch his pipes. I remember that vividly. And I'd played his pipes only a few times before. One was because they were bigger and heavier than mine, and a longer blow stick, and his reed was a little harder than I was playing. But I'd sometimes sneak downstairs and just have a crack at it. Let's hear what this pipe sounds like. Oh, it's louder and better than mine. But when he passed, I thought, okay, I don't know if are those for me for sure or not. Like, nobody's really said anything, and was I supposed to, am I supposed to get them like a gift? I just didn't know how the process worked. And it had to be in January sometime when I got back going with Jamie. I think because of the Christmas season. He died on December 20th, and it was Christmas and New Year and a little break, and I think we got going. And Jamie might very well have been over at the house or talked with my mom about this and said, we're going to get the pipes into action here. I think this happened a lot when I was younger, and it's just the last few years these things are starting to click, that the underhand stuff that was going on. But I remember being at a lesson, and he's like, well, the pipes are there, let's get them out. And I'm like, I don't know if if I should play them. I've just always played these ivory ones here, and they're your pipes now. You need to play them. These pipes shouldn't sit here doing nothing. So we played them, and I honestly don't remember the first little while of playing them. I did play them pretty sure that year in Vancouver, and I think it took a few years before I really kind of fell in love with the instrument, and I didn't have this attachment to them because they were my dad's at that point. In fact, I think I had an anger to them quite often because, SOB, you're supposed to be still here playing them. Yeah. And now I'm looking after these things, and I'm trying to win prizes, and they're heavy, and I wasn't gaining out of them. So it took me a while to find my way into that instrument, which I'm glad I did because they're superb.
Yeah. Now, you come from a big family with lots of brothers, and I think a few sisters too.
Yeah.
Did they play as well?
I'm the last of 8. I don't need to go down the whole chain. My oldest brother, Lionel, was the bass drummer in the City of Victoria band, and he played for a while until some injuries prevented him from playing a lot. And he's still, when he's feeling all right, he's out coaching the Army band, and he coaches a grade 5 band out there. I think it's just to keep his hand in the game, and he loves it. My brother Brian, it's a funny story. He is a golfer, and he was an avid golfer and a semi-pro. But my father was determined to get a piper. Back in the days when, damn it, I pipe, we need one. So he's like, I don't really like this, but I'll learn something. So he started in September, and on Christmas Eve he played the Brown-Haired Maiden, and on Christmas Day he quit. And I never got the chance to ask my dad, like, what was that all about? And you let him, so he played. The rest of them, my other brother Steve, I think he always felt himself tone deaf, but he was rhythmical and he liked it, and he was in the Army. but he never really liked it. And my sisters, it just didn't float their boat, and I think partially they didn't like the sound, and the
Yeah.
other part is we also had a big family in a small house. And I think they were like, oh, bagpipes again, shut that up. So I can't blame them.
Right. So what about you joined the city of Victoria. I think you were 12 years old, playing in a first grade band in Victoria, obviously with Jamie Troy. Tell us about that experience.
Oh, it was amazing.
Were you conscious of being so young and such a good band?
No, not at all. By that time, I was going down to band, and we had a junior band, and for some reason it just fizzled one year. I think, I mean, I was the youngest, but like two or three people moved away, and another couple that were a little older went off to school, and it just seemed to be, that was it. There was four left. And Jamie used to teach me, as you know, so quite often we'd have lessons a little earlier some nights, or we'd go, and he's like, why don't you come along to band on the Monday and Thursday and start learning the stuff? So I started learning the stuff. Even back in those days when bands weren't big, we were still struggling for numbers in Victoria. So he felt there was something I could do. It was an activity, but he also thought I had the chops to make it. And so my grounding was massive within 9 years. Like it was 25 years of piping in 9 years. I mean, I would show up at 6 o'clock, 5:36 for sometimes for junior band. We'd run through a couple of things, and then I'd be practicing myself up in Mrs. Duncan's studio. Band guys would show up. We get a little break. I always liked the break because I was a kid. It was a store down the street, and my dinner half the time was a can of pop and bags of chips and garbage, and then back to the band. And band practice at that time would be 7, and it wouldn't end till 11 o'clock sometimes. Which was way too late for a young guy. But even when I was half exhausted, I was taking a lot in. And then my lesson would be Tuesday night with Jamie, and that went for 3 or 4 hours. And
So why don't we talk about Jamie Troy too? And he had a big role in your formative years.
he
Why don't you talk a little bit about Jamie?
he's a guy that I speak to him not as often as I should. He's a second father figure to me. He's easily the most remarkable person I know, both in his skills of what he's been able to teach, but also his generosity and how he took me in as his own kid. I mean, I was his other kid. Well, in fact, I was his kid before Jamie Jr. showed up and Jackie. I mean, he looked after me. There was only maybe 3, 4 people out of the house when my father died. I think there were still a few left, and we had a small house. My mom had to handle all that. I mean, he kind of took a load off of her shoulders, I think, doing it. But he liked the challenge. We got along great. He looked after me. I have all the time in the world for him, and he taught me kind of everything. And he also very quietly, which again took me years to realize, very quietly, kind of from the outside, knew what I was up to. He knew some of my friends. He knew what was going on. He knew if I was getting mischievous or in trouble. And I mean, I was a 14-year-old kid in Victoria. I could have gone any direction, but you can edit it or not. I never got arrested. I never had a problem. I had a lot of friends that had that sort of issue. And I think a lot of that is because I was so deeply involved with the band, and I didn't want to, get in trouble one way and then go, oh God, if Jamie gets called, I'm doomed. And the band's going to be mad at me. And all the band guys, Steve Geddes, Dave Hennigan, Warren Fells, Bill Wishart, these guys were 7 years old or 8 years older than me. But Steve was, again, he's just passed now, but a little younger than Jamie. Bill Mossy. These people, it was remarkable how they took me in. And it really, really has been a big source of how I look at the right young kids now in whatever area I'm at. I do whatever I can to help them and get them there. If they can't afford it, that doesn't matter. We just get them there.
Yeah.
They play, and it's part of the reason we'll talk later about other events. But
Yeah.
they were the whole group was fantastic.
What about Jamie Troy? And for someone so accomplished, do you think he gets the credit that he deserves worldwide? Do you think, find yourself having to explain, does he deserve more?
I think he gets. I think he did get the credit for a while, but as the next generation and next generation came through, and I think piping generations are generally maybe 10 to 15 years, not a full sort of family-sized one. Those first generations knew all about Jamie Troy and what he could do. What happened is that we couldn't continue to grow the band bigger and fund our way to Scotland. So if he had that interest and that group of people and the knowledge and technology and everything we had today, and he was sort of at the same level comparatively, I think he would have had a chance at being much more respected. The band would be over every year. They'd be doing things. It's tough to be a one or two shot wonder.
Mm-hmm.
He did go over, and the people that were in the higher positions in bands, like pipe majors and judges, knew who he was from his studies, or they'd taught with him in Coeur d'Alene, etc., or knew about him, and they knew what he was capable of. And when the band was over that 1 year, sort of, shook the world up a little bit. So,
Yeah.
did he get the respect? I don't know. I'd like to think so. For those who know him, there's a lot of great, amazing solo pipers from the 40s, 50s, 30s that
Sure.
most of the young group today wouldn't have a clue who they are.
True.
Because they didn't have 6 silver stars and 3 gold medals and show up and with all the technology that makes everyone who's good
Right.
kind of a star now.
So, considering your dad was a piper, your brothers and sisters, you had a little bit of pipe band involvement.
Mm-hmm.
But you're one of these guys, and you're well known for one of the rare pipers who really has this incredible sense of the beat and playing on the beat, whether you want to admit it or not. That's kind of what you're known for, that being in the pocket all the time. How do you think that happened? Given just.
I don't know. I mean, I've had funny conversations with a couple of senior judges in Scotland that claim that this comes down from generations of, and it's them claiming that it couldn't be possible for someone international to be any good at their sport. So it's got to be the Gaelic that's in me from 2 and 3 generations back. That's what brought it out. And it's quite funny because I did have a fellow say, "Where are you actually from?" I said, "Well, Toronto." No, like originally, well, Victoria, like, on the West Coast I grew up. No, you know what I mean? Like, where's your family? I said, well, my grandfather's from Ireland. I said, and my grandmother, comes from just outside of Glasgow. Ah, that's it. And it seems like they just solved the answer. That's why you're so rhythmical today. God-given gift. I don't have another answer. Some people are just lucky in some aspects, and maybe I have that. The ability to control it, I think, has probably been my biggest thing. And I've worked on that, and that was instilled in me through Jamie Troy and Johnny Fisher as a kid too young to argue. That it just, here's a pocket, you need to understand what that is, and we're going to play it this way. Now we're going to play it where we sound frantic. Now we're going to play it where we sound relaxed. And it was really a lot of teaching about beat placement and how to do it as a kid, which was just way over my head, except you're internalizing some of this stuff. And, if we want to do it this way, we're going to play these embellishments bigger or little. I'm glad I have it. I know that I can turn to it at times and think, find your place, find the pocket, and make the embellishments work around it. But how I got it, who knows?
Yeah. Well, it sounds like some of that teaching, or a lot of that teaching, was to try to develop that in you. Do you think, we'll talk about teaching later, but do you think that is a crucial part of teaching? Do you make that a part of your teaching, is talking about the beat and where the beat might fall?
It's my biggest part of my teaching, probably. It's like my mantra is this whole playing with control and just always being in control. And it could be just an A-type personality thing of being in control as well, but I need to understand and be on top of what I'm doing. And if that's because I want to play beats this way or that way. And we learned that, and that was exercises that we did, which were really just alterations of stuff that was from some of Archie Cairns things, some from Angus Mackay, the Piper's PT, and just evolving those and then making them work for you. And I've been doing that for, 40 years.
Yeah.
Always changing around. So I never played an E-doubling exercise like 90% of the people do it. Which I was really quite happy to see a little plug, Jim's book, come out, where he broke down a doubling and he had you playing it from different rhythmical ways, so you understood that it might occur this way in any tune. And that's what we've been doing since I grew up.
Right.
Burls were fast, burls were slow, burls were played as triplets, doublings were played open, doublings were played closed. We'd play things round and point and then pointed and just and then here's what we want. So you always had a home base of correctness, which is one of the things I find is really at fault now when I'm judging and playing, listening to players, that they've developed a way to play correct, and it leaves you. But that's a personal thing. We'll save that for another question.
But okay, so this business of playing on the beat and having that sense of it. How important do you think that is to any piper's success? Not talking about the top tier. Obviously, those guys.
I would say
just any piper.
I would say it's the absolute most important thing, because if you can't play in time, you have no ability to add what we have to do, a dynamic, which is really stealing time from the time. All of our dots and cuts have to be able to be played absolutely perfect, so that when we really want to open one up or close one down, for instance, a strong week, medium week, I want to think that I can train someone to do it this much or this much. But if we don't have that home base of being able to keep in perfect time, you can't do that. And that's when we get people it's really good and then it gets frantic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just a lack of training. They play correct and then they decide, I'm going to do this. Well, you haven't really sort of done that before. How's that going to work?
Right. So when you say play correct, what do you mean? Like, what's your definition of correct?
Correct would be percussionately, is that the right word? Correct, percussively correct, where a dot is half of its value. If you can do that all the time and then come up with your number and say, instead of 75-25, these marchers are going to be sort of 80-20, and I'm going to make them all the same. And you hear it when you hear someone playing dum ba da dee da dum dee dee ba da dee dum ba da da dee da dee da dee ba da dee dum ba dee. Every sort of, like I like to call the beat height or the dot height, every one is the same. There's no kind of emotional movement going through. So it's perfectly right playing, or for lack of better terms, I tell them it's the bagpipe music writer's sound you're getting, which is excellent.
Yeah.
It just leaves you flat. There's no emotion to it.
Okay.
But you need to be able to do that to add that emotion, I think.
Right. Interesting. Okay, so let's just move ahead a little bit. You've left British Columbia, I think, in the early 1980s, maybe 81, 82.
82.
82, to come to Ontario. Why did you do that?
A combination of reasons. I was not sure what I wanted to do at the time. I was 19. I was, I think, a bit of a rebel, wanted to sow his oats. Looking for something to do. I'd thought about maybe going to Edmonton at the time because the Fort McMurray thing was starting, and a friend of mine had gone up there. I was enjoying doing a bit of carpentry work and drywall work there. I saw the band as being a bit of a chore. I can't really remember why, or maybe it was because I was 19 and I couldn't really go out for beers with them. I had not enough money and I needed a change in my life. I'd met Beverly by then, and the idea to come to Ontario, where my girlfriend was at, I had spoken to her father. He said he would try and help me out. He was a contractor. But most definitely it had to be a place where there was a vibrant piping place. And I thought, there's a big piping scene in Ontario. I can go there and try that out in Toronto, and we'll see what happens.
Mm.
You know, the rest is long history now, 33 years later. But
So it's kind of driven by looking for something more, maybe.
I was looking for something more, and
Beverly.
well, she was a big part of it. I mean, that for a young guy, it's like, well, and I have a girlfriend here too. This is great, and I might be able to get a job, or there's a lot of people in that area just by population, so I might be able to get some help. And people saying, yeah, you should come out, you should come out. And I thought, I'm young. I'm not tied down with anything. Why shouldn't I go there and try it out? And a ton of pipers. I thought it was definitely never meant to be a disrespectful thing to Jamie. That'd be the last thing in the world. But there was stuff like, I want to change stuff. I was hearing the Clan McFarlane play, which was similar to the City of Victoria, but different. I was hearing Guelph play, which was kind of cool. It wasn't really the style that I would aspire to, but I had a ton of respect for the fact that they were kind of bending things around and doing some really neat things. And then I heard the Frasers play, and I thought, wow, I don't know that I like the Mason's Apron being round. I played that tune for 7 or 8 years this way. But I thought, the overall package that I'm hearing, this is really cool. This doesn't sound so left, right, left, start, one beat, next tune, da-da-da-da. Because really, the East Coast was just ahead of the West Coast in this new medley thing. And it was like, I could write stuff for this. This could be more fun. And I think I started to see that I had a chance to expand myself as well. So it wasn't just all about, is my bass drone right, and am I doing all right in the 2/4 march on Saturday? And because if you don't do that, then is that it? You're done? And which is a lot of problem with kids. They have a couple of contests. If they don't do well why bother? Now I suck. Because they don't have all these other venues with the pipes.
Yeah.
So it came out. It turned out to be an amazing move
Yeah.
for me.